Chapter 39, Ancient Civilizations. The next morning we went straight to our ancient cultures classroom, instead of our normal classes. The field trip wouldn't take the whole orn. We'd be back in time to go to our last 2 classes. Searchlight was starting to wish he could practice flying instead of the field trip again. I, however, was looking forward to being in a setting where I would only have 1 classroom's worth of mecha in my helmet the most. The teacher led us to the ground bridge station, which was just a short walk from the school. She talked as we went, but it was hard to hear her over the traffic noise, and no one was really paying attention anyway. I'm starting to hate this field trip again, Searchlight thought. I need more flying practice, if I'm ever going to get good at it. Maybe instead of practicing Circuitsu, we can go to that field after school. Or maybe during the field trip we'll be able to sneak away at some point and find a good place to practice. We got to the ground bridge station and the teacher gathered the group together to talk before we went through the bridge. Students, the ruins we're going to in the outer sectors of Simfer are fairly safe if you stay with the group. She shot a pointed look at Searchlight. All the teachers knew to keep an optic on him during field trips. There are other parts of the sector that are very dangerous, and some of the buildings and even parts of the ground are unstable. So it's very important to stick with me. Also, pay attention or you'll miss important information for the quiz we'll have on the trip in 2 orns. Ratchet was glaring at Searchlight. This time I will not be roped into leaving the group and going exploring. Searchlight didn't notice Ratchet's look. He was too busy wondering whether there'd be any good places to explore and what the best way to sneak away from the group was. Breeze watched both of them. This is going to be another adventure, isn't it? She glanced at me. I'm not sure if I'm really feeling up to it this orn. So everyone, ready to go back a few thousand forns in time. Here we go. She led the way through the ground bridge and we all filed in afterward. We came out on a large platform, surrounded by tall, decaying buildings. Rust drifted down from the sky in flakes big enough to be visible, but thin enough to catch the atmosphere and spin as they dropped. Welcome to Ancient Simfer, the teacher said after she followed the last of the students through the bridge and it closed. The very first Cybertronians lived in this city. This is our ancestral homeland. Of course, these buildings aren't nearly as old as the beginning. But they go back quite a long time, to before the Quintesson Wars. Tell me, what can we see, just standing here? I looked out at the buildings around us. They were different from the modern buildings and reminded me of Eocon. Our buildings now tended to be round, tall towers, and while it was true that some of these were round, they were more ornate and complex in a way that seemed natural, almost as if they'd grown that way like crystals. Students answered, describing the platform we were standing on, or the buildings, bringing up points and historical facts that we'd learned previously in class. I just listened. I wished I was good enough at flying that I could take off and soar through this dead landscape. There was something peaceful about it. Once, long ago, Mecha had walked these streets and lived in these buildings. Eventually, we started moving. The teacher took us on a route she knew was stable. Later, we'd go down to a lower level of the city and then circle around and end up where we'd started. Our second stop was an enormous round building. The teacher said it had been a library of some sort, built by the ancients. All the knowledge kept in it had been lost, though, in the Quintesson Wars. Many things had been lost in those wars. Most didn't know it, but at least some of it had been lost on purpose, erased to keep it out of the hands of the Quintessons. Master Yakatron had been a young mech during those wars. He didn't think about it much, but I had learned a lot over the time he'd been teaching us. That is awesome, can we go in and look around? Searchlight asked. No, the teacher said. I'd love to, but the building is structurally unsound. Sorry, Searchlight. There are other buildings we'll explore later on in the trip. Okay, let's move on. Searchlight lingered at the back of the group, looking up at the building. Don't even think about it, Ratchet growled. Don't worry, Searchlight said. It's just a library, after all. Not that exciting. Besides, the teacher's watching. I couldn't get away with it right now. Fortunately, his common sense had developed to the point where if he was forced to wait long enough, he occasionally talked himself out of doing stupid things. Occasionally. Unfortunately, the first explorable building was only 2 stops away. The teacher led us into the elegant structure, which was full of hexagonal architecture with ornate pillars and lots of doors and hallways leading in all directions from the entryway. The teacher told us we were free to look around and that we'd be staying here for about 20 breams. She wanted us to read an article and fill out a worksheet about it, both of which we were supposed to have downloaded onto our datapads. Then we needed to meet back in the entryway in 20 breams. Come on, Searchlight took the lead. Instead of going up the stairs to the second floor like most of the students, he took us to a small, closet-like room with a window. This is as good as anywhere, he said. Ratchet narrowed his optics. You don't want to explore. Not here, I don't, Searchlight said. Come on, let's go back to that really big building. He started climbing out the window. What? Ratchet said. No. SHHH, Searchlight said. Searchlight, Bree said this is. Probably not a good idea, Searchlight said. I know. Come on, I have less than a quarter of a form left before I'm an adult and then I won't have an excuse to do stuff like this. You realize that argument makes no sense, Ratchet said. Exactly my point. I'm still a fledgling. You don't need to make sense until you grow up. And please don't tell me you don't want to know what the inside of that giant building looks like. But, we have to read the essay. We can take turns reading it out loud on the way there, Searchlight said. No problem. And we'll be back before they even know we're gone. That's what you say every time, Ratchet growled as Breeze followed, Searchlight out the window, leaving the 2 of us in the room. Can you believe it? Ratchet said. We're going to be in so much trouble. I borrowed his words from moments before, playing a recording back at him. That's what you say every time. Ratchet huffed, but climbed out the window. And which one of us is right every time? I followed him, and the 4 of us crept around the side of the building. All right, Searchlight said when we had started back toward the big building. Ratchet, you want to read the essay to us as we go? Ratchet huffed. I feel so silly about this, he pulled out his datapad and started reading out loud. Searchlight cut him off after 2 sentences. Too boring, he said. Never mind. We can skim it later. Ratchet glared at him and kept reading, louder. He didn't stop until we got to the big building Searchlight wanted to explore. These adventures actually didn't always end in disaster. Only about 30% of the time. The inside of this building may or may not even be that interesting. It could just be entirely rusted out. However, while we could usually pretend we'd gotten lost, this time if we got caught, there would be no making excuses. We are so doomed, Ratchet said. This is awesome. Searchlight headed across the rusty suspended sidewalk to the front door, or the remains of the door. It looked like time and rust had eaten away at it, or maybe something had broken it open. Inside we could only see blackness. We started down the tunnel, and soon the light from our optics was the only thing illuminating our way through the dark, confined passageway. This library's got pretty narrow hallways, Searchlight said. And not very many datapads. It's just the entryway, Ratchet said. And it's an old, abandoned library. I doubt there's anything but corrosion here. We should go back. It's another horror hall of it scenario, Bree said. Why is it always a horror hall of it, I wonder? Maybe it has something to do with our poor judgment. The characters in those tend to be pretty stupid. Don't say that, Ratchet hissed. Last time you said that, I almost got eaten. Hang on, Searchlight said. Scrap. We've come to a dead end. Oh well, Ratchet said. Guess we'd better go back and join the rest of the group. Maybe there's another way in. Searchlight put his hand on the wall blocking our way. Why in the world would you have one long hallway that just ends? By the light from his optics, it didn't really look like a wall to me. I moved past Searchlight and he watched as I dug my fingers into a crack and pulled. The door slid open. Ah, Searchlight said. Right. That makes sense. We stepped out into the open. Breeze gasped and the sound echoed back at us. The inside of the building was one vast cylindrical room with a ramp circling the wall all the way up to the top. Shelves upon shelves lined the walls, interrupted every so often by a door. Wow, Searchlight said, summing up everyone's thoughts. Even Ratchet was stunned. Searchlight's optics followed the spiraling walkway all the way to the dusty top of the building. The roof had partially caved in and was letting shafts of light down through the cavernous tower. See now, I'm kind of wishing I had a ground-based alt mode so I could race them to the top. Oh well, come on. He led the way to the base of the spiral and we started walking up the long, circular ramp. I wonder, it's pretty open in here. It might be a good place for flying practice. Not unless he wanted to take another field trip to the hospital after this. Some things, many things I'd just let him do, but if he decided to practice flying in here, I was going to have to try and talk him out of it. I wonder how far up it goes, Searchlight said. It's kind of hard to see. Maybe you should do a double-blind analysis on it, Ratchet muttered. Searchlight glared at him. I'm never living that one down, am I? We kept walking. Most of the datapads were gone and the ones that were left were all broken or rusted. The rooms off to the sides of the tower just contained more shelves and sometimes a table or desk. The walkway had holes in it here and there, and occasionally there were places where part of it had rusted away or broken off. Ratchet started reading the essay again as we walked. When he finished, he put his datapad away. We should head back. Okay, Searchlight said. Let's find out how far up we can go. The building creaked and swayed. Breeze grabbed Searchlight's arm, suddenly terrified. The shifting stopped. What was that? Ratchet said. Probably just the wind, Searchlight said. Come on. Maybe we should go back down, Breeze said. I really don't want to fall. Right, Searchlight thought. She's scared of heights. Okay, he said. We're getting pretty close to halfway up, though. I kind of wanted to see if we could get to the top, maybe even out onto the roof. He looked longingly up at the rest of the tower. It looks like some of those higher walkways have gaps in them where they've rusted or fallen away, so we might not make it anyway. Oh well. The roof would be a great place to take off from. I could fly out over the whole city. And land at 1,000 clicks a door and kill himself. Let's go back down, Breeze said. Okay. We started heading back down, but either we had really bad timing, or our coming here had upset some sort of balance because when the wind picked up again the walkway started to twist and shake under our pids. We all grabbed at the rusty bookshelves to steady ourselves and waited for the tremors to stop. There was an enormous crash from somewhere beneath us. Then everything went still and quiet again. But we were stuck. A large, rusty section of the walkway a little farther down had broken away and fallen down to the level below, leaving behind just the bookshelves, which were still somehow attached to the wall. Well, that's just great. Ratchet glared at Searchlight. What did I tell you? Searchlight walked over to the edge of the remaining walkway and looked down. With our upgrades we're tougher, and could probably survive the drop down to the next floor, but there's always the chance that that floor would give out too, especially after this one landed on it, and what about Ratchet? We need to calm the teacher, Ratchet said. No, Searchlight said. What? Yes. Quickly, before the whole building comes down. Look, the bookshelves are still intact and attached to the wall. We can climb across them. Are you out of your processor? Ratchet said. Watch. Searchlight carefully climbed out onto the bookshelves. They creaked under his weight. Whatever was keeping them on the wall was probably rusty as well. We all stood completely still, unable to look away as he inched across the gap. The last few bookshelves started to pull away from the wall, tilting precariously. He had to jump at the end and catch the ledge, but he made it and pulled himself up. See, he said. Easy. But if anyone else comes across now, they'll fall, Ratchet said. Someone calm. The teacher. It'll be fine, Searchlight said. Ratchet, you're probably the lightest right now. You come next. Come on. I'm going to die and I hope he never forgives himself for it, Ratchet thought, but approached the gap as well. The bookshelf swayed and pulled farther away from the wall, but Ratchet made it across, leaving Breeze and me on the side. If I stood at the edge, my range covered Searchlight, just barely. We're only going to get one more across, Searchlight thought. Those shelves are going to come down under their own weight if we give them a few more breams. I wish I'd gone last. Well, I would let Breeze use the shelves. There might be another way for me to get across. I come at Searchlight because I didn't want to yell. He put a hand to his helm to answer. Yeah. Back away, I said quietly. I'm going to jump. Okay. Searchlight backed up and waved Ratchet back too. Can you jump that far? What? Ratchet said. No one can jump that far. I didn't need to jump that far. I backed up, then sprinted toward the place where the walkway ended. No. Breeze said, and Ratchet just stared in horror. Really, who did they think I was? Searchlight. I wasn't that crazy. I leapt, careful to angle myself correctly, and transformed. I gave myself a burst of speed with the jet engines of my alt mode and then transformed again to sail through the atmosphere and land in a tumble. I skidded to a stop at Searchlight's pids. They all stared for a moment, then Searchlight grinned and reached down to help me up. Mech, that was awesome. I let him help me to my pids and then turned to look at Breeze. She stood on the other side, door wings flicking nervously. It's okay, Searchlight walked to the edge of our side of the gap. You can do it. Remind me, she said. Remind me never to let you talk me into something like this again. I know I'm sorry. But I need you to trust me. It's just another adventure. An adventure that involves being impossibly high up and then falling to my death. She took a deep vent. I'm getting kind of tired of those. You can make it across, Searchlight said. Come on. Before the rest of the building comes down or something like that. Breeze took another deep vent and then climbed out using the bookshelves. They creaked and swayed and she gasped, freezing in place. She's not going to make it, Searchlight thought. I have to get out there a little farther, he said. Just come out a little farther. I can't. Breeze said. I'm going to fall. You're not going to fall, Searchlight said. Just keep coming. He took a deep vent and before I could stop him, he jumped back out. The closest bookshelf to our side pulled away from the wall and fell, but Searchlight managed to get to the next one before the first went down. It crashed onto the walkway below. What are you doing? Breeze said. There's no way back now. He held a hand out toward her. It's okay, he said. The bookshelf he was on shifted. Running out of time, keep coming, I've got a plan. Breeze took a deep vent and inched farther out. She made it to the next bookshelf, but still had quite a way to go before Searchlight would be able to reach her. Searchlight couldn't go out any farther because the bookshelf after the one he was on was definitely not stable enough to hold his weight again. Faster. Searchlight said. Come on. Get ready, Wave, I'm counting on you. She scrambled along the shelves, clinging desperately to each one until she was almost to Searchlight. The shelf he was on gave out and he moved to the next one, which brought him close enough, even as it fell away. He grabbed Breeze's arm and pulled her away from the bookshelves, swinging her out over the gap and toward Ratchet, and then he let go of her as his shelf fell. She flew through the atmosphere and I just barely caught her and pulled her onto the ledge. Searchlight fell. He transformed and flew out from under the bookshelf just before it crashed into the walkway beneath. Then he soared across the building and crashed into the wall on the other side, bringing a different bookshelf down on top of himself instead. I pushed my range out. No. Breeze gasped. There he was, still conscious. I started running and the other two followed me. We had to cross another gap that one of the falling bookshelves had made, but this one was small enough, we could jump over it. It seemed to take forever to get down to the level where Searchlight was. My longer legs got me there, half a bream before the others, and I lifted away the bookshelf, pinning him to the ground. He moaned and tried to sit up, but I pushed him down. One of his arms had been shattered and crushed and was leaking heavily. Wave. I borrowed Ratchet's words from earlier. Are you out of your processor? He huffed a pained laugh. Maybe. Ratchet got there. By the Allspark, Searchlight, he said. If you ever, oh no, he knelt and prodded Searchlight's arm. Ow. Searchlight jerked away. Sorry, Ratchet said. Is your pain grid turned down? Wah, Searchlight said. You just got that upgrade. Ratchet said. Turn the pain down so you can hold still while I tie off these lines. Oh, right that. Breeze, come. The teacher, Ratchet said, then addressed Searchlight again. Ready. It took him another astroskin or two to figure it out, but then his agony faded to a more manageable level and he relaxed, a little. Okay. He still had to try hard not to flinch as Ratchet tied off energon lines to stop his arm from leaking. I wish I had the medic upgrade so I could stop the pain entirely. We need to get him to a real medic. Breeze was talking to the teacher, explaining what had happened. Searchlight passed out before Ratchet was finished. The teacher showed up, and some medics came through a ground bridge to take Searchlight to a hospital. We were in so much trouble. We got a 2 Cortex detention sentence and a 0 for all of the assignments associated with the field trip. But though that was kind of hard to swallow, we were all glad we made it out alive. Except Ratchet. He was absolutely furious and determined to never again let Searchlight talk him into leaving a group on a field trip. Of course, he was like that after every field trip. We were quiet and contrite for the rest of the excursion. Breeze and Ratchet kept thinking about Searchlight, hoping he was all right, and worrying about how this would affect their grade. The detention and the grade weren't what I was worried about, though. I had pushed my range out to cross that entire building. We could probably fit our whole school inside of that library. And we didn't have nearly long enough before this field trip was supposed to end. As time ran out, I got more worried. I wasn't entirely sure how big my range was because the group stayed pretty close together, but I doubted that it had shrunk enough that I'd be able to survive the rest of school. We still had 2 doors of class. We came full circle and got back to the beginning too soon. The ground bridge opened for us. The teacher was going to wait and watch the rest of us go through before she came. I hesitated, waiting as long as I could, but I knew I couldn't try to stay here. So I braced myself and walked through the bridge. The wave of thoughts and feeling and emotions hit me like a wall and I stumbled despite myself. The ground bridge station wasn't really more crowded than usual, but now I had a lot more of it in my helm. Maybe 80 or 100 mecha. I forced myself to stand straight and walk over to where Breeze and Ratchet were watching me. It was difficult to isolate their thoughts among so many, but I could tell from their faceplates that they were worried about me. The teacher came through and led us out of the station and back toward the school. By the time we got back to school, my helm felt like it was splitting open and I was about ready to pass out. The teacher dismissed us to go to our other classes and warned Ratchet, Breeze, and that if we didn't show up for detention this morn, there would be serious consequences. Breeze and Ratchet guessed what was wrong with me, but they couldn't ask out loud. We all went different directions. Fortunately, my next class was with Cable Reach. I held out about 5 breams, but it was getting to the point where I was really going to shut down. I raised my hand. He was a little surprised I had something to say, especially since he hadn't asked a question. Yes, Soundwave. I'm not feeling well. Can I go to Oker's office? I also sent him an internal comm. My range is too large. I need to leave. Certainly, Cable Reach said. If you need to go, then go. What's going on? Do you want me to get in touch with your next teacher and make excuses for you? Yes, thank you. I could barely form the words, even over the silent comm. I got up and left the room. I had about 2/3 of the classroom wing in my helm. Hundreds of students. I was tempted to just let myself collapse out in the hallway, but I forced myself to walk. Turning down my pain grid was barely helping at all. I couldn't leave the school without bypassing the guard at the gate somehow. But I went out into the yard and walked all the way to the fence. I found a good hiding spot where I only had the mostly empty student wing in my range, and I sat there and turned off my screen, giving into exhaustion. The pain continued to mount, though, even as my range shrank. And I'd have to go back for detention, somehow. I had dozed off when Cable Reach come at me asking where I was. I replied and checked my chronometer. Classes were over and I needed to get to detention in the next 10 breams. I got up, but I was dizzy and I still felt like someone was pounding on my helm with the Forge of Solus Prime. I started heading for the nearest doors, but then Cable Reach and Ratchet came into my range and I changed directions to go meet them. Come on, Cable Reach said and led the way back to the classroom wing and into an empty room. I managed to get something for you, Ratchet said. So you can go to detention if you want. He unsubspaced a tiny, rectangular object. You probably already know this, but let me explain. This is a pain chip. It will completely block your pain receptors. You can't keep it in longer than a drawer or two, though, or your self-repair systems will reroute the connections and you'll never be able to use a pain chip again. Sit down. I sat behind the nearest desk and he walked around behind me. I watched through his optics as he slipped the device into a port in the back of my helm. Instantly the pain was gone. I slumped forward as relief washed over me. Are you all right? Ratchet said. I nodded. I still felt dizzy and weak, but fine other than that. Thank you, I said, to reassure them. Okay, Ratchet said. After detention, you should go somewhere you can't hear anyone, and I'll take it out again. I nodded and got to my PIDs, then followed Ratchet to detention. I nearly collapsed a couple of times on the way. Now that the pain was gone, I just felt sleepy, and I was having to fight very hard to stay conscious. Detention wasn't bad. Now that my range was a little smaller and the surrounding classrooms were empty, the noise in my helm was much less overwhelming. And without the processor 8 keeping me tense, I was able to put my helm down and drift off into recharge in just a few breams. It seemed like only an instant later Ratchet was shaking me online. I got up and stumbled away from the desk. The room was emptying and the teacher who had been monitoring detention wasn't sure whether to be worried about me or annoyed that I'd powered down for the whole drawer. Would the roof be a good place for you to go? Ratchet asked. Are you all right? Breeze thought. Just how big is your range right now? Smaller than it had been, but still bigger than normal. And though I didn't feel pain, I still felt off. Yes. But I want to get Ravage first. He would start to worry. He knew that we'd had a field trip this Orn. No, Ratchet said. I'll go get Ravage. There will be too many mecha in the student wing. You go up to the roof. Whatever a large range does to you, it's not just pain and it can't be healthy. I climbed the stairs and Ratchet headed off toward the student wing. Breeze wasn't sure whether to follow him or to go with me. I stopped and waited for her. She hurried to join me and I started walking again. You know, she thought. We really should make a rule about not having mental conversations with you. It gets so confusing. I shrugged. Of course, I'm having a mental conversation with him right now. It's not fair. You always have to talk to respond, but we don't and it's not fair to us either. Actually, I could usually just nod or shrug to convey whatever I wanted to say. And playing next words back to them at appropriate moments was kind of a fun game. So, where are we going? The roof. Why? It's quiet. Oh, she said. That makes sense. Are you all right? I shrugged, then nodded. She flicked her door wings, not quite convinced. What does that mean? I feel okay, I said. Ratchet told me he managed to steal you a pain chip. He could probably get in trouble for that, I realized. We got to the roof. I hope Searchlight is okay, Bree said, then shuddered. I'm going to have nightmares about that. She eyed the edge of the roof uncomfortably. I can still feel myself flying through the atmosphere, still see him falling. I thought he might offline. I don't want him to offline saving me. He's okay, I said. This time. Breeze crossed her arms and lowered her door wings. One of these Orns, our luck might run out and someone could get really badly hurt. He never thinks about the consequences of his actions. I think there's a disconnect in his processor. He doesn't seem to ever think about how what he's doing could affect the future. I nodded. That sounded about right. Why did I have to fall in love with someone who has mental problems like that? I don't even know if that's diagnosable or treatable. I've never even heard of it before. I looked at her. Not that I'd want to change him, though, she smiled. He's perfect. Silly, charming, noble. Oops. Sorry, Soundwave. Thanks. She frowned. Thanks. You're the only one who ever apologizes. She shook her helm. That's depressing, but most mecha don't know they need to be careful about having awkward thoughts around you. Maybe if they knew, more mecha would apologize. Or, you know, maybe they'd kill me or hand me over to the government. That could also happen. A few breams later, Ratchet and Ravage came up to the roof. I sat down and Ravage climbed into my lap, purring. I was worried when it was Ratchet, not you, he thought. But he told me you were all right. Are you okay? I feel okay now, I said, and looked at Ratchet. Sorry, Ratchet said. I have to take it out. What? Ravage looked up. Take what out? The question bought me a few more precious Astroskins while Ratchet explained to my cat what was going on and what a pain chip was. Then he came around behind me, and I braced myself. The device came out of my helm and the weight of the too familiar processor 8 crashed down on me. I managed to avoid crying out, but everyone else could see the sudden tension in my frame. You're like this a lot, Breeze thought. Tense, like you're waiting for something. You're in pain more often than you tell us, aren't you? I didn't want to worry them, but I didn't want to lie either, so I just didn't answer. I manipulated my pain grid so that the processor 8 wasn't quite so crippling, and scooted back to lean against the railing at the edge of the roof. Soundwave. Breeze said. I'm okay, I told them. You can go. They were hesitant, but left me on the roof with Ravage. I waited for the pain to go away until the sky went dark and filled with stars. The next Orn, my range was normal again, and the processor 8 had faded to almost nothing. After detention, we all went to Searchlight and Ratchet's room. We might have tried to go visit him in the hospital, but he'd messaged us to say he would be back to school before lights out, so we just waited and talked and worked on homework. Soundwave, Ratchet said eventually. He'd been thinking about it all Orn. Are there any other symptoms besides the pain when your range is too large? If there are long-term side effects, this could be worse than any of us know. I shrugged. Dizziness, I said. That's all. He narrowed his optics. He had better not be lying to me. I nodded. Of course, it wasn't true. Sometimes I had a hard time retrieving memory files from times like the Orn before when my range was covering too many mecha. It was probably a bad sign. They didn't need to know, though. There was nothing they could do about it, and so I didn't want them worrying about it. For a while during the past few terms I'd gotten kind of hopeful about my future. I'd even thought about what I wanted to do after secondary school. But I didn't really want to think about it anymore. I didn't want to lie to myself, but I also didn't want to admit that my condition would probably just keep getting worse. Eventually, I'd have to go life entirely by myself, maybe even leave the planet and live on the moon or something, away from everyone else. Or maybe I'd offline, or go crazy, or something like that. We waited for Searchlight. It was about sunset by the time he showed up. Breeze got up and rushed over to hug him before he'd even made it through the doorway. They stood there for almost half a bream before Searchlight pulled away. Hey, he said gently. I'm fine. She followed him back to the berth and sat down next to him. I know, she said. You scared us for a couple of breams in that old library, though. I always knew libraries were a bad idea, Searchlight said, then looked down at his new arm. The repairs were finalized, but he was still getting used to it. Even though it was the same model of arm, it would take him another one or so before he had full functionality. Sorry about that. That was pretty bad. And it could have been worse. You know what? Yeah. Bree said. Searchlight sighed. I really am sorry. He looked down. We shouldn't have left the group. My immaturity could have gotten one of you hurt, or worse. He looks legitimately remorseful. And I got us all in trouble, and, Soundwave, are you alright? It occurred to me last off-cycle that you might have expanded your range to find me under the rubble. I nodded. I was okay. You know, Bree said, noticing the gesture. I don't even know who he's answering. I have a sort of proposition. Wait for me to finish, Searchlight said. Lying under that bookshelf, I think it finally clicked. Don't ever let me do something like that again. It's great to have fun, but if that building had come down on top of us, we might not all have made it out of there, and I don't think I could live with myself if I got one of you killed if I got anyone killed. The building wasn't even that cool, not that that matters because even if it was the coolest building on the planet, the risk was not worth it. Even Ratchet had stopped doing his homework to listen. Silence fell. Am I dreaming? Ratchet said. Or did you actually apologize for doing something stupid? 100% actual apology, Searchlight said. And I know I say something similar every time this happens, but I really mean it this time. And I give you all permission to forcefully stop me if I ever try something that dangerous again, especially if I'm trying to drag you into it with me. It wasn't even that fun, not like that sort of thing was when we were younger. I am not a very good friend, am I? All the scrap they've had to put up with because of me. We forgive you, I said. Speak for yourself, Ratchet grumbled. Searchlight looked down, actually hurt for once. That was new. Oh, fine, Ratchet said. I forgive you too. But I'm going to hold you to it. No more insanity. No more, Searchlight said. Well, maybe a little. But not life-threatening insanity or rule-breaking insanity. I promise. You can still have fun while following the rules, I hope. Breeze, you had something you wanted to say. We all looked at her. Right, I just wanted to say I think it's frustrating and confusing when we have half of our conversations with Soundwave silently. I think it's also dangerous because someone might notice and figure it out. So I think we should make a rule that, whenever it's possible, we talk to him out loud. I wasn't sure what I thought of that idea. It really wouldn't make much of a difference for me. Obviously there are times when we really need to have silent conversations, Searchlight said, but I'm willing to try to talk out loud when we can. Ratchet. Fine, Ratchet said, and went back to his homework. Wave. I don't care, I said. It settled then, Searchlight yawned and stretched, wincing. His new arm still ached a little when he moved it. Oh, hey Ratchet. Ratchet didn't look up. Ratchet. I'm trying to study here. I got you something to say, thanks for saving my life. Well, Ratchet huffed and turned around in his chair. You wouldn't have offlined, provided the leaking stopped in time. Then he frowned, noticing Searchlight's grin. Do I dare ask what you got me? Just some essential medical equipment. Searchlight pulled a large wrench out of subspace. Here you go, Docbot. Ratchet narrowed his optics. And what exactly do you think I'll be able to use that for? That's a mechanic's wrench, much too large and unwieldy for repairs. I figured you could throw it at Mecha when they annoy you so you stop having to buy new datapads when you break them. Ratchet glared at him, then reached out for the wrench. Searchlight tossed it to him, and he caught it and studied it for a moment. Solid and heavy. Let me see, who am I annoyed at right now? He raised the wrench and in one smooth motion threw it at Searchlight, hitting him in the helm. Searchlight didn't even have time to raise his arm and block, though he'd been expecting it. Thank you, Ratchet said, and turned back to his homework. Searchlight fingered the dent on his helm, still grinning. I've created a monster. Don't be so proud of yourself. No more insanity. Bree said. I bought the wrench before I made the promise, Searchlight said. And that's not life-threatening or rule-breaking. Besides, he definitely needs one of those. With some practice, he'll be the most terrifying medic ever to loom over an operating berth. Besides, he really does go through a lot of datapads. Pass me that wrench again, would you? Ratchet said through gritted denta. Time went on. True to his word, and to all of our surprise, Searchlight actually behaved himself during the rest of the field trips for that class. He also stopped complaining when we insisted that he follow the rules. In fact, he started to develop a healthy sense of respect for rules and boundaries. He didn't stop being Searchlight, of course, but we got in trouble less often. The two of us actually got good at flying pretty quickly, in part because of our circuit suit training, and in part because Searchlight was the kind of mech who would work really hard for the things that he wanted. Flying was more tiring than walking, but I came to enjoy it and the freedom it gave me. It was nice to be able to leave the school and even the city behind and go find somewhere remote where I could be completely alone for a few jors. I could also go visit my symbiotes every time we had an orn off of school. Since I wasn't an adult yet, I wasn't technically supposed to fly all the way to another city by myself, but no one was going to get mad at me for it. We all got really busy by the end of the term. Searchlight had decided to run for student body president, and Breeze, Ratchet, and I spent a lot of time helping him with his campaign. He didn't really need our help, though. The whole school knew who he was, and the vast majority thought pretty highly of him. The other students were all over the idea of putting him in charge. The teachers were a little worried. He won by a landslide, of course, at the end of term election. I was grateful that he was so busy because it distracted him so I could hide how hard things were getting. My processor aches merged into one eternal processor ache that only waited if I was away from civilization for a whole orn, but I pushed through to the end of the term because I knew that I could spend the entire break at the symbiote shelter if I wanted to. And after the break, I would just need to survive one more term and then I'd be out of secondary school. And out into the real world where I would have to somehow make enough credit to survive while living alone and far away from everyone else. I didn't really want to think about it.